Greetings, everyone. Banners on the wall. Anthony Russell back here once again. And well, I've made a bit of a habit recently of kind of going around the owners of the national division. But I've spoken to Richie Hargreaves enough over the last couple of years and have annoyed him. So let's get somebody else from within the Bristol Pitbulls organisation. And who better than the head coach of their national division side, Jamie Elson, to walk into the firing line, stand in the spotlight, whatever you want to call it. So Jamie joins me on the line from his home. Thanks for taking the time to speak to me, Jamie.
Yeah, no, of course, pleasure. Yeah, looking forward to it.
A few bits and pieces of news have obviously come out of the Pitbulls today. You've kind of been sort of formalising a little bit of your off-ice structure. Obviously, people, like Charlie Keane, your sort of sports therapist, Steve Cousins, kind of your assistant sort of manager of, sort of chief wrangler of things are back. But two quite sort of important names in terms of folks sort of stepping away. Matthew Simpson, your equipment manager, is moving on, and I mean, probably the only way to describe him is a legend of British ice hockey photography. Graham Goodman, known as Fly Pfeiffer, is stepping back from kind of doing the first team and only doing the seconds, is my understanding.
Yeah, I mean, Graham, what's that to say about Graham? I mean, the guy is obviously well known around the hockey circles, absolute legend. We're really fortunate that, as much as I always use the term, we're a new team. Obviously Bristol isn't a new team. It's been around for a long time with Richie and Graham's been a long servant of the club for a long time. And, my understanding is that, he's certainly, he's not going, but it's, work commitments, life commitments. It's just tough finding that balance. So he's still going to be around. He's still passionate, obviously, about the team and the club, but taking a little bit of a back step. So picking and choosing a little bit more when he's going to be around. But, yeah, great guy. Obviously, sad that he won't be around as much.
If anybody's earned the right to start picking and choosing when and where he does things, it's probably Graham Goodman, for the amount of service he's given to the Pitbulls organisation when it was in the wilderness, shall we say. I think probably I'll start with the really painfully obvious question, because I think it's pretty much a little bit of a meme within social media circles in the national division. How determined are you to sign every British player under the age of 23?
Yeah, look, we again, we go back to sort of talking about us being new. So when I say new, we mean new to National League. When I came on board with Richie 2 years ago, obviously coming into my third year, we talked about where Bristol were, coming back to Bristol, the rink, obviously Division 1, then what the kind of plan was for National League down the line. That happened a hell of a lot quicker than we kind of were originally kind of looking at. But the biggest issue we've got here is that we don't have this we don't have this junior development pool. We don't have this pool of Bristol players all ready to pack up cases and come home. Now that we're back in Bristol, there's not that. We're not fortunate enough to have that. We're going to be a long way from the days where we see Bristol junior development sort of fit in the team. So we have to be smart. We have to find good young prospects that maybe are overlooked or maybe not getting the right opportunity elsewhere, and bring them in. So from day one, me and Richie were pretty adamant that the plan here was to be a young team. We're obviously a young team in terms of National League, but a young team on the ice. We want to be young, fast, exciting. We kind of want to have that identity, and that comes with its issues. This year was a battle. I would say lack of experience was probably our biggest downfall, really, this year. There was, when we go back and we look, there was some ugly nights where we kind of got a bit of a cricket score racked up on us, but there was a lot of those losses were 1-goal losses and painful last-minute losses and OTs and just stuff where we kind of look back, we just didn't have that experience about us, that kind of group of guys who know how to kill off a game late on. And that's what happens when you have a young, inexperienced team. But the only way these guys get experience is by being in the deep end and playing. So, we're not hiding from it. Our group's young again this year. What we're trying to do right now is build for, I wouldn't say a title charge or anything, but we're trying to build for the Bristol Pitbulls being a team that's more consistently way up higher up in the league standings in sort of 2 to 3 years' time. We're trying to build our own little group here that we believe in.
I mean, certainly one of the things from last year, and I think it was one of my my criticism of the Pitbulls as a roster right at the beginning of the season was at times it felt a little bit like playground football, in that the kids were kind of all chasing around after the puck and didn't feel like they had much kind of immediately in the way of structure. But you seem to have a little bit more success kind of in the middle chunk of the year, when you kind of seem to find a little bit more of, whether you want to call it like an on-ice identity or whether kind of the systems are embedded in, there seems to be a bit more about the group as they kind of sort of gel together. And then I think really the big marker point for you guys, and he was so talismanic for you, was the loss of Owen Sobchak to injury for a large chunk of the back end of the season. A lot of people kind of pinpoint that as sort of the Jenga block out of the tower that saw you guys fall down out of the playoffs. Would you say that's a fair assessment? Because it's a lot to kind of put on one guy. I know Owen's a very good player, but it's a team effort that at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, it was obviously, there's a couple of markers through the year where you kind of look back and you kind of say, oh, God, that happened, and there's two obviously real obvious ones, and that's, losing Sobs, who's a dynamic forward, who was kind of the heartbeat of the team and obviously the captain. He's the leader. Losing him in January, and he was actually playing really well at that point. He was going through probably his best spell of the year. So, you're losing your leader and you're losing the guy at the time was pretty hot. And Nick Corrick had come in early December, and he was just starting to find his feet. So the couple of games before Sobs got injured, the two of them were starting to kind of hit the ground, and we were starting to get excited about what we might see. And then, we're in London and you lose Sobs to a pretty much a season-ending injury. It's tough. And then the other one is obviously a player well, Adam Harding. Ad's only got properly kitted and iced in 3 games all year, which it is a massive loss. When we're talking about being a young team and being a new team, you bring in a guy like Adam, who's such a veteran. Even I call him a veteran. He's only just turned 30, but I mean, you look at his CV and his elite prospects already. The experience in North America, GB, multiple years in elite league, a couple of good years in national, like the last year with you guys. And Basingstoke, he had one of probably, if not his best year, away from the injury. So yeah, it's frustrating. You go back, we never once had our full lineup the whole season. So, don't get me wrong. I think every team has their ifs and buts. And if this had happened, the year would have been different. I think every coach can go back and nitpick and kind of say, oh, if this had been in our favor, this had happened. Every team has that story. But we feel like our story was, that we never kind of got the full group and kind of the full picture of what we wanted Reading. And when we did have close to that full picture, we felt there was nights where we could see what we were capable of, but just too few and far between, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, the big question about Adam Harding, of course, is the club did announce relatively recently that he is back. Is the intention that he plays this year? Is he? I know he's been, for anybody who doesn't follow Adam on YouTube, he's been in Canada. I know he's talked very briefly about some treatment he's been having to try and get over the injury that he's had. Will we see Adam Harding on the ice? I think is probably the big question.
Yeah, I mean, where he's at, I'm sure he won't mind me talking on his behalf, because we've been fairly open in the last couple of weeks about where he's at, and I think the club's intention is to with Adam publish a video sort of closer to the season, catching up with him and talking about his health and obviously kind of what he's been through in the last year and a bit. But yeah, he's in a really good place right now. It's tough. Like, we were frustrated as a club for him not to be on the ice, but then every time I guess as a coach, and I'm close with Adam, I have a lot of time and respect for him, but every time I kind of maybe get frustrated by him not being around, you kind of remember, like, he's feeling it twice as much. He's frustrated that he's not on the ice helping you. He's a hockey player. He wants to play. He doesn't want to be on the bench helping me. He wants to be on the ice contributing with the boys. So it's been a tough spell for him, but he's in a good place. Yeah, off the back of the season, he spoke a bit with Adam Jones, actually, obviously a Basingstoke guy who's close with. And to be fair to Adam, he phoned me one day and he said, I'm off to Vancouver. I'm off to go and see a guy over there who's a kind of a world leader in concussion. Deals with a lot of NHL guys. So obviously he's got that kind of expertise and that knowledge. And, spent 2 weeks over there, his own time, his own money, kind of doing that off his back because, ultimately he's just turned 30. He's a long way from wanting to call hockey, call it a day on hockey. So yeah, he's in a good place. He came back from there feeling like he got some answers and that feeling that physically he was better. And he's kind of going through a long spell of rehab right now, but he's back on the ice. He's training a few days a week in Bristol, a couple of days a week in Cardiff. And yeah, he's actually excited. Every time I speak to him, he's kind of smiling now. He's actually excited about getting that season going. So we're excited as well now.
Yeah, just lift the curtain a little bit for Pitbulls fans and for other people who maybe don't quite understand, because obviously Adam, player assistant coach, kind of what were his responsibilities from a coaching perspective last year? Because obviously, I mean, like, quite an adept forward, spent a lot of time, playing in all situations across the ice. I mean, was he focusing particularly on your forwards? Was he running your power play? What was his kind of cog in the machine on a match night for you guys?
Yeah, so on match night, he was running the decor. I just think in the modern game now, it's hard to run a bench with one guy. One coach trying to oversee line changes and for D-men and forwards. And, in the modern game now, you're trying to get line matchups. You're trying to see what line the other coach is going to go with. You're trying to see structural stuff on the ice as it develops, like how's your team kind of keeping to systems, what's the other team doing? And then, guys coming to the bench, asking for feedback, asking questions. And, you're trying to juggle all those balls. It's honestly, to do that as one guy on a bench is a tough job. And to give your team the best chance of winning on a night, doing that on your own is tough. So as much as he was a loss as a player, he was definitely an asset on the bench. And he just, that he's got an experience. We're a young group, but he's an experienced guy. He's a real veteran of the game. So, he's calm. He's not a shouter. He really sees the game well from a player's point of view. So I think the guys relate with him really well. Like certainly the forwards, I thought he was really good. As much as he was coaching the D and running the D changes, when he had gaps, he'd be speaking to the forwards, in particular the centerman, which is obviously a spot where he plays, where he's great at. I think the young guys like Mason Lipsey in particular, I think learned a lot from him last year. They started building up a good relationship. And Lippo is a guy who really wants to be better every week. So. Yeah, like any information you could get, hard to be talking to him about face-off draws and plays and different things, responsibilities. So that was good. And then in the week, for me personally, it was nice to have something to kind of bounce off. As a coach, sometimes it's a little bit of a lonely place. It's a kind of I wouldn't say to you against the group, but like you've got an opinion or a message that you're trying to get across, and it's nice to have someone to reinforce that, or it's nice to have someone to kind of bounce off and kind of say like, hey, am I a million miles off the mark with this? Is like, this is how I see it, but is that right? Is that how you're seeing it? Am I wrong? Am I getting this wrong? So it was nice to kind of have that springboard. So in the week, he would help on the ice. He was, to be fair, as much as he wasn't playing, he was at the rink every week. He was at every practice. He was on the ice in his tracksuit, helping us coach, feeding back with guys. Really good systems, like understanding the game. Like, I'm a bit of a hockey nerd on that side of things. And, we do a ton of video. So, yeah, he was good with that stuff. Like, he would pipe in and kind of look at special teams again. Yeah. I mean, you've seen him play. You know what he's like. But he's a great PP guy. His expertise in those areas was good.
Yeah, I'll ask the question because I'm interested, because you are, of course, the head coach of the GB under-16s. Who is it easier to coach, the kids or the grown-ups?
Well, I guess it depends what type of group you get, but I will say, I've just come back from the 16s. I'll give them a lot of credit. The GB 16s group I just had this year, so that's the group. That is not Owen Bruton's group. We had Owen Bruton in that year group the year before, but sort of Brainy Caps, some guys who just sort of signed 2 ways in London. That's a good year group. That's a seriously good year group. 2007 birth year. But we just come back from Riga with those guys in April, and we had a lot of fun. Like, that was a talented group. There's a lot of names in that we're going to see do well in British hockey in the next 2 to 3 years. We're going to see some serious young talent come through that group. So when you get a group like that really get it, it's a lot of fun. Like, that was an easy group to coach. But they've got a lot of parents in that group, or hockey dads, hockey coaches. So they're a pretty smart group. We had a lot of fun with those guys. But I'll be honest, like, I loved our guys in Bristol last year, and it was tough. It was a tough year to lose as much, because we actually have some really good guys there.
Thinking about last year, and I asked this question of Matty Davies, because, of course, I mean, obviously Hull finished below you guys, but you guys finished outside of the playoffs as well. And it's really easy to kind of look at the season and not feel great about it for obvious reasons. I'll ask you the question I asked Matty. What went well?
Well, actually, I watched Matty's interview not long ago, actually, and I think the one thing that straight away he said is, we've got to be massively happy and positive first and foremost about what's going on off ice. The return to Bristol, after Richie, and Mike and running this team for so many years on the road, getting back to Bristol. Obviously, the first year was a huge success in Division 1, but hey, we won most nights, and we all know that. When you're a winning team, it's a lot easier to put bums on seats. So I think coming to National League, knowing we're going to double the number of games, and we were realistic. We knew we were going to lose more games. You kind of wonder what that fan base is going to be like. Hey, when we haven't won 2-3 games in a row, when we had a big pumping last week, like what's the fan base going to be like? And it was everything year one in Division 1 was and more. Like I think it was a little bit slower getting going, but I mean, we sold out the Christmas game. I think it was Telford, and we were sold out every game to the end of the year. And I think the biggest statement we can say is like the last game of the year against Peterborough at home. I think Mike was saying a similar story. Like it was a dead rubber game. We were out the playoffs. We were dead and buried. Like we couldn't go up. We knew we weren't qualifying, and the game was sold out 12 days before the game. So to sell out 1,500 people with 12 days in advance of a game in this country, I think is pretty bold. You don't hear that happening too much. And that's a testament, I think, to the fan base that's growing in Bristol and how passionate the people are about having a hockey team there to support. So, I mean, off the ice, it's exciting. It's a great rink. It's a great facility there, Planet Ice Rink. It's I think it's the perfect size for this level of hockey. And, we're quickly becoming a permanent fixture on the sporting landscape, I guess, in Bristol. Obviously, the rugby's big and 2 football teams, but the Pitbulls name is getting back in the picture there, and it's great to have that. So off the ice, that is the biggest positive we've got right now. On the ice, it's like you said, Matty said the same, it's a slog. Like, when you're not winning that many nights, when you're outside the playoffs looking in for a big chunk of the year, it's a tough slog. But like I said, we had the second youngest team in the league. So I think, we had some big positives in terms of seeing what some of the young guys are given an opportunity, what they're capable of.
Yeah, I think there's, I tell the story of the fact that a National League player who will remain unnamed said that Jay Warren is the best person in his role in the entire division, which I think speaks a testament to a player that had never played at that level of hockey before. And a player who, it should be said, had played at that level for quite some time, immediately sort of picked him out. Said he hated him into the bargain, but that is Jay Warren doing Jay Warren's job, I believe.
Yeah, he's one of those guys. He plays. I'll be honest, he's one of those guys I think every team would love to have on their team, and I think when you have him on your team, you realize just how good he is. And when you play against him, I think you obviously hate him. I mean, I actually coached against Jay. I had 2 years at OHA coaching with Oldie, and Jay Warren. During those years, Jay was a Swindon and under 18, and we used to hate playing. I'll be honest, we hated playing against him, and because he was the same as an under 18, but then when you have him on your team, he just honestly just a great kid, like really great kid, hardworking, absolutely all in. Like absolutely loves it, like passionate, wants to be the best he can be. So people kind of see that kind of agitator side of him and the side that kind of gets under people's skin. But when you get to work with him, honestly, like guys like him and Mason Lipsey are the type of guys that actually make getting to the rink fun as a coach. Like, they're the guys that you kind of turn up and you want to go to work and help those guys improve because they're just great kids.
I mean, one of the things that you sort of look at that roster, and you mentioned a lot of those names, you went through a lot of people last year. I think it ultimately used, it was like 8 or 9 D-men, I think 18 forwards, 17 or 18 forwards in total. What caused the turnover? And I realized the really easy answer there is that things weren't working, so we sort of changed them. But there were teams who, in a similar position to yourself who did not go through quite as high a turnover of players. Obviously, I mean, you landed on your feet with someone like Nick Corrich. I mean, you tried Alex Roberts and then obviously released Alex Roberts, who ended up sort of fitting arguably a bit better with Romford and what they were trying to do. But what happened? I suppose that's the question from my perspective. What happened? From a Basingstoke perspective, we made a few changes during the course of the year. We didn't really add that many people, but you guys, I mean, getting in Max Berbrea was a bit of a left field, signing, but also getting guys like Morgan Pizzo on a two-way. Some of those sort of original Pitbulls kind of ended up moving on and doing different things. You had Christian Moore rotating in and out. What happened?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is like I wouldn't use the word turnover because in terms of actually like guys coming and going, it wasn't actually that high a number. It's just like I said, I think ultimately we weren't quite deep enough. We were probably one or two players light going into the season on where we needed to be to compete, and then you lose obviously Adam Harding. You know, we felt Hards was going to be back fit and healthy from day one, and that obviously unfortunately that time scale kept delaying until it ultimately ended up being a season-ending injury. So we were just ultimately short. Like we weren't deep enough at where we wanted to be. So, we added a lot of two-way guys. Again, unfortunate that I have eyes at the sort of GB and the juniors. So guys like Christian Moore on my radar, Luke Smittle, Jacob Whitesay. These were guys that were on our radar, kids that we love, that we're passionate about being full-time Pitbulls in the future, and obviously Luke Smittle has come this year. And like I said, we're going down that injury story again. There was nights where we start the year where we're getting the two-way guys in and we're 4 lines deep, and then by the end of the year we were going to games with 8 forwards and 4 D-men, and just that's the story of a 56 game season. But in that there is obviously some turnover. I mean, Alex Roberts, like you said, was ultimately just didn't fit. There's no doubting Alex's talent. The year before he was exceptional for you guys, and then obviously moves on to London and ends up in a playoff final where they were pretty close to actually winning it by the end of the game. So almost ended up going all the way and being a playoff champion. But ultimately it just didn't. Not everyone suits every environment, and we were a young team that was needed a little bit more patience, a little bit more time, and we just didn't have enough support for a guy like Alex around. Like Alex needs a couple of big guys around him to support, and then he can come up big. And that's what he did for you guys in Basingstoke, playing with Ash in particular. When you got guys like that who are going to feed him the puck, he's going to be lethal. It just didn't quite work. We're hoping that obviously Ads was going to be playing, and we had big expectations to put Hards and Robbo together, and we felt that would have been a great combo. But so we make a change, and Nick, to be fair, I thought was exceptional. As the year got on, then he started finding his feet because he hadn't played since March, and he didn't roll in until December. So he was a little bit a few weeks to kind of get back to game speed. But he's a serious talent. And then, like we talked about already, you lose Sobs, and Max was a little bit left field. But obviously, I know Max well from Cardiff days, and he's still active in Cardiff, skating a bit. So we needed a guy who could come in and be available to go straight away. And Max, as much as he's been out for 2 years since COVID, it's kind of ended his career in that last year in Swindon. It was tough because the initial assessment that we thought Sobs might just be 6 to 7 weeks, and then you're like, we can't really go and sign an import from abroad, because when Sobs is back in 6-7 weeks, we want that guy back in the lineup. But unfortunately, that 6-7 weeks sort of turned into 10, 11, 12, and ultimately the end of the year. So things might have been a little bit different if we kind of knew at that point it was going to be season ending.
I think certainly a few Swindon fans certainly were certainly not probably as impressed. Not that they weren't impressed with you anyway. She kept beating them, which probably they didn't like a massive amount. But the idea of seeing Max Berbrea play for somebody else probably filled them a little bit with a little bit of a sort of a disdain in that sort of sense. I mean, touching on yourself, Ashley, because this is one of the we talked a lot about everybody else. We do need to talk about you. So of course you do have quite quite a long history. People who can't tell where your accent is from, you are from God's country, from the south of Wales, and you've obviously, I mean, you many years kind of coaching with Cardiff in that sort of assistant role. I realise I haven't actually asked this of any of the other people, because obviously Matty Davies, Aaron Nell, who I've spoken to this off season, are obviously coaching as well as kind of running bits and pieces. So I'll ask this of you, because you don't have any other kind of responsibilities apart from the coaching. How hard is this? How hard is it to coach at this level? Because the buck stops with you for this on ice bit. How hard is it, genuinely?
I'll say this year was the hardest year I've ever done in coaching by a long way. It's it's like I said, ultimately when you're the head coach, the buck stops with you, and you have to take accountability. And I like to think I'm not shy in taking accountability. I think when things haven't gone well, I feel like I've stepped up to the plate, and ultimately, if it's on me, it's on me. And a lot of this year as the head coach, it has to stop with me, recruitment or the style of play or different things like that. Some of the decisions we make, you can make excuses, but I think as the head coach, you do have to get the buck stopping with you, and that is tough. I've been fortunate that I've been in some good spots. I've obviously had a good career in Cardiff, came to the juniors, was fortunate enough to be mainly with teams that were pretty successful, winning leagues and national championships and stuff there. We had the main group I was with had Callum Buglis, who's obviously in Peterborough now, Owen Griffiths, who's Guildford Flames. I had those boys every year for 6-7 years, and we had we built them into the top U18 team in the country when they were the last year guys. So we had a lot of fun, a lot of success, and then that rolls into 5-6 just unbelievable years in Cardiff, where we won a lot, and you kind of forget. Sometimes you forget, like, it's not always like that. It's not it was a little bit of a fairy tale ride, and don't get me wrong, there was a lot of graft and there was still some downs in that period, but there was a hell of a lot of ups. And when you come out and you win some championships, it's like memories I will absolutely cherish and never forget. But coming into Bristol, it's gonna be tough, and but if you're passionate about it, and I'll be honest, I was listening to Pete Russell, actually. I was at a GB camp last week, and Pete was there talking, and Pete's just so passionate when he talks, and it just kind of reminded me of a few things actually listening to him last week, just kind of why we do it. Like, it's an obsession. Like, coaching is an obsession, and as much as this year was tough, and there was times where it was a hard one to swallow, you just forget sometimes, like, how lucky you are to do a job that you really care about.
Given some of the restrictions that you kind of have in terms of the roster you're able to put together in Bristol, because you have a budget, how easy is it to kind of really kind of imprint your coaching style, your coaching philosophy that you want to see out there on a group that you have to put together with the budget that you do? Because, like, everybody kind of has the idea in their head of what they want hockey to look like, even me, and I skate like a giraffe with an inner ear disorder. But like, you've coached in it, you've done a lot of coaching, you have, I'm guessing, a pretty set idea in your head of what you think is right and wrong in the main. Obviously you have to adapt differently depending on who you're playing, but like, I say constrictions is maybe not the best word, but the framework that you work within at Bristol, how easy is it then to kind of take what's in your head and be able to put it out there with the players that you're able to put out there?
Yeah, in hindsight, honestly, it's been one of the toughest things. Like, I've got every coach has obviously got an idea how they want to play, a sort of a blueprint for how they see the game or how they enjoy coaching or how they want a team. That identity, like I guess, comes from them. And kind of coming into Bristol, I have that. And in year one in Bristol in Division 1, as much as guys were, it's a lower level, and guys hadn't been coached and didn't have the background as much, I felt we were, as close as we could get within the ability range that we had to that kind of identity. We were young, we were 4 lines, we were deep, we were fast, we were a good forecheck team, we were pretty relentless, and that's why we had a good year. But yeah, it's tough. Like, I came into this year with a real idea of kind of how I wanted to play. And if we're honest, like we had to make a lot of changes, by the second half of the year, like to find ways to grind out results. We ended up playing a long way off kind of what the blueprint was at the start of the year. And a lot of that is recruitment. It's tough, yeah, because like it's the other coaches, Matty and the guys, will tell you like it's not just an open field. There's X number of players out there, but there's a certain number of players straight away, just logistically, that just aren't available. Location, in this league with a lot of guys being part-time, obviously is one of the huge recruitment drivers. So, there are a lot of guys, Bobby Chamberlain, you and Matty were chatting about Bobby, would we love a guy like Bobby on our team? I would love a guy like Bobby on our team, but, he's coming out of MK probably in a really, pretty well-paid position. And, he's a whole guy, and he's got an opportunity to go back to a project that Matty's doing in Hull with a lot of guys who are friends. So, a guy like that is just ultimately we'd have to throw unbelievable money to stupid money to be able to even entice a guy like that. That's just not feasible. So it is tough. There's so many restraints on recruitment. It is all the coaches will tell you that, but it's the bit I found the hardest, which is kind of why I would say we've kind of got a recruitment plan at the moment now, that we're kind of just keeping to. We've made the decision that we can't, we don't have many, we're trying to be sensible. As much as we have bums on seats and people think that we're going to be a rich club right now, we have to build this in a sensible way. We have to build this in a way that this is going to be here for a long time. We have to make step by step. We have to be commercially smart. So, we're building. The budget last year was reasonable. We're going up a little bit this year, but I mean, I'll be honest, I'm looking around the rosters now, and I think a lot of teams are going up from last year by somewhat. But the youth on the side is about us building a blueprint and a foundation for where we're going to be in 2, 3, 4 years time. If we can keep a core, I've kind of got 13, 14 names in my mind. If we can keep a core 13, 14 names here for 3 to 4 years, I think we'll have something real special.
Given the fact that the Basingstoke Bison are out of the league, the one player you picked up from us, the old campaigner himself, Neil Lydiard, I have to confess I was slightly surprised that more guys didn't head your way.
Yeah.
And I realise a chunk of this might be to do with the over 25s rule. And the like, and the fact that quite a few Bison players have ended up playing for the Bees this year should be a shock to absolutely nobody whatsoever, given most of the ones that have gone back had already played there. But I do find it interesting that a fair few guys didn't head down the M4, or at least more than Neil.
Yeah,
but at least you got your shot blocker set for the next season.
Yeah. Look, I'd be lying if I said we didn't speak to a handful. But the issue was everyone along that M4 corridor. Look, I'll be straight. I'm sure the guys won't mind me saying, but we spoke to Norks, we spoke to Doherty and Liam Morris. Pretty much every guy in there is looking for a job, and you can't blame them. They're trying to figure out where they're going to be hockey-wise for this year. But there's a lot of guys on that team that we would have liked to have, but it's tough. Bees were chatting to them, Swindon are chatting to some of them, MK are chatting to them, London are chatting to some of them. Some of those guys are obviously making a decision maybe to step away from National League for a year. So again, it goes back to the kind of the last question. You kind of have a blueprint for kind of what you're looking at, and the one thing a year ago that recruiting last summer was stressful and it was tough, being the new boys in town, and you're trying to convince guys to come to a new team. It was tough, and we kind of said, hey, we want to have an action plan, a blueprint where we're keeping, like I said, this core. We're not re-recruiting every year. And I guess as much as some of those guys on that team will have a big impact on their teams, I was also a little bit nervous of, hey, when Basingstoke are back, touch wood, I think we all hope that Basingstoke are back in a year. If that happens, how many of those guys are going to be straight back to Basingstoke? And understandably so, that's their team. That's where they're local to. So we didn't necessarily, as much as we would like guys to come in and make an impact for a year straight away. Some of those guys we kind of felt are going to be somewhere and they're going to be back for a year. Guys like Milts are obviously on a two-way in Guildford, and I think that guy will be an elite league hockey player soon. So I guess a little bit of of it was we had some other options available as well, and some of those decisions were longer term decisions, not just about the here and now. As much as we all want success and we want to have a better year this year, we've also got to make some decisions around budget restraints and travel and location of guys, and whether we saw some of those guys as being Pitbulls more than 9 months. And as much as Lids is 45, and who knows where he'll go.
It's 45 with the mind of a 21-year-old having sat next to him at the end of season awards. Doesn't know when to stop, that boy.
I'm actually really excited about actually having Lids. We there's no hiding place defensively. We were nowhere near good enough last year. We gave up the most goals in the league. That has to be better. And we've got some young guys who we like, but we need a few older heads, and we need some guys who really take pride in their D. And I said to the goalies when we signed Lids, like, he's going to be a favorite for you, because he's going to eat up as many pucks as you guys are probably going to eat up. I watched back his video from the show, and I was gobsmacked at how many like people say he blocks a lot of shots. I went back and watched 3 or 4 games. I watched the games we played again, and I just couldn't believe like how many shots he gets, even just a piece on it, or whether it's a full shot block. And actually speaking to Lids over the summer, like his passion for wanting to play again, I was really impressed. I was really impressed. Like, he's not a 45-year-old guy who just kind of wants to go through the motions one more time. Like he was saying, like, hey, I want to come somewhere. I want to be part of a team and help them win. That's all I want. I've got more in the tank. And he played in our barn, and he knows it's fun and it's loud. And he's been excited. So that was good. It's good to have a veteran guy like that who's still got that energy and passion and love for the game. So we're excited to bring him in. But a few of the other Bisons unfortunately sort of went through the net a little bit on us.
Yeah, you mentioned there, and I mean, you sort of beat me to my next question. So you talk about sort of keeping a core of guys, and you talk about the fact you conceded the most goals in the league, a completely brand new net minding pair for this season. Will Curlin and Tyler Perry last year, Matt Smittle, and the recently announced Ben Norton, who's going to be on a 2-way contract as well with Cardiff for this year. What was the motivating factor there? Will Curlin's move to Milton Keynes, I confess, confuses me, because I don't know why he has effectively stepped into being a backup. But these are two-way. These are two-way sort of deal, sort of conversations, as it were. What was the rationale for you guys in terms of completely clearing the slate with your netminders for this year?
It's a tough one. Ultimately, we weren't good enough on the back end last year, and that's not putting out the netminders, because in front of them we gave up the most shots in the league. So, statistically, you give up the most shots, you got to conceding the most goals. So, we can't put it on those guys' doorstep. The group in front and the structure, like you said, we had a style of play that we wanted to start the year, and if anything, we were trying to be aggressive on the front foot, and it just made us way too open. So that's kind of, going back to what I was saying, we had to change how we played a little bit as the year went on. But I mean, ultimately, Ben Norton's someone I've kind of watched for a couple of years through the GB scene. And I don't know, at the end of the year, I was looking at the league and kind of looking at, I'll be honest, I was looking at Gospel in particular. Leeds were obviously an exceptional team this year, but Gospel's such a good goalie, Ryan's got such a good goalie there. And I've been lucky. I've been in Cardiff for a number of years with Barnsley there. And I don't know, I was kind of looking at the studs in the league and thinking to myself, God, I'd love a Gospel right now. And, and goaltending is going to be an interesting story the next couple of years, because, there's not much change with the goaltenders. Like the top guys in the league, Gospel and Headley's and the Mars and Ethan James, like all these goalies right now are kind of very much established. Brad Day and Telford, they're very much established, and I don't see much move from them. They haven't got much reason to move. Like they're all pretty settled at their clubs. They're well respected. Most of them live local to the team. So we were kind of sitting there saying, like, how do we put ourselves in a position where in 2 to 3 years' time we feel like we've got a guy like that? And it's bold, and I'm sure like maybe we'll be sitting here at the end of the year, but I think Matt Smittle's got way more in the tank than people give him credit. I think he was, I'm sure he'll say himself when he goes back and watches some of his games this year. he had some good nights, he had some poor nights. But I mean, when you go back and watch his best displays, like I went back and watched him play back end of the year, a couple of games against MK, and I thought he was exceptional. So we know what his best is, you know, and the challenge for Matt is to find consistency and bring that best out. Like most goalies, but find a way to be the best version of himself, you know, more often. But when I watch the best version of him on his nights, like he's a good goalie, and he's obviously got great size, but even with size, he's actually athletic. But he has to find a way to be more consistent, and that will be his challenge coming in. And in Ben Norton, I feel, and if you speak to kind of goalie coaches, you know, I lean on Ewan King in Cardiff, who's GB goalie coach as well. You know, we're not going to put too much pressure on him, but Ben is got a huge potential, like huge upside, I think, for where we see Ben being in a year or two here. So, you know, we're giving a young guy an opportunity here. Cardiff are excited about having him around as a third guy to develop for the future. And we hope that Ben might be a guy in this league in a couple of years' time, and the teams will hopefully be jealous of, kind of saying, well, where do we find ourselves at Ben Norton? He's a kid with a ton of potential, great attitude, comes from a great family, kind of characteristic-wise, everything we want our Bristol players to be about. So we're really excited, but we know we're going to have to be a little bit patient, give him some time.
So kind of the idea is to just, like I say, lean on Matt a little bit because he's got that bit more experience and he's played at this level before, and just try and help Ben acclimatize to what he needs to do at kind of a senior level after. Where was he last year? USPHL in Columbus, I believe.
Yeah, I'll be honest, like he was in USPHL, he was on a tough team, he was on a team that struggled a bit like we were last year. But actually sometimes as a goalie,
so it wants to recreate the experience at home this time. So
I mean, sometimes as a goalie you want to be in situations where you're not facing just 12, 14 shots a night. Like he had some ugly nights. He was telling me about it the other day. They dropped him down to the second tier for a game or two, and I think he said one night he had 85 shots or something, and I was like, wowzers.
It's like the Isle of Wight never left.
So but you know, I've challenged them both. I've told Matt and Ben, you know, they know the deal. They're coming in with starting 50-50. Like, hey, you guys are both going to get an opportunity to play games. We want them both to play, but the best way to get the best out of people is competition. I'm a firm believer in that. You know, competition for places brings out the best in people, and that's the only way people move forward. So, you know, we've said to them both, like, hey, you're both going to get a chance to play. Like, we're not looking for one of those guys to sit on the bench, but like, if one of those guys is going to win us games, they're going to play more. And that's going to be the challenge. You know, Ben is coming into senior hockey for the first time. And yeah, I think he's realistic of that. You know, he's been on the ice in Cardiff a few times now in the summer, and I think it was an eye opener. Kind of, you know, how good the level is. He's out there with some elite shooters, and but you know what? He was excited about that challenge. You know, come off the ice, and I think it was an eye opener, but like one that he can't wait to kind of meet head on. And again, you know, I went back and watched some of Matty's games from the year before in MK when they went to the playoff finals, and you know, in that stretch, watching some of those games on game video of Matt, like I thought he was good in that stretch all the way going through the playoff final. I saw a guy like that could help lead a team. So you know, that's a chance for Matt. I think he knows he's got more in the tank and more to prove. So he's a great guy as well, and a bit like Lids, you know, chatting to him, he's just super excited about kind of a new challenge and coming in and trying to help us be a winning team. You know, his attitude and his kind of everything he says excites me. So we got two really honest, hungry, hardworking goalies, and you know, Matt's 24 and Ben's 19. So if these guys put in a good shift this year, you know, we've got a lot of years left in the tank with these two.
Owen Sobchuk came to Britain having played in what is now the defunct PHL in Australia. Tanner Butler, your new defenseman, is currently playing with the Newcastle North Stars. So is it you or Richie who's watching Australian hockey out here on Saturday morning like I am?
Yeah, I've got time for watching Australian hockey right now. To be honest, just a good network of contacts, really. Sobs is a funny one. Like, there's obviously some guys down there who have some British connections. So when he was down there last year, one of them reached out, who knows Mike and Richie pretty well, who was down there on one of the teams, and said, like, I know you guys are coming up and you're looking for imports. He just said, like, we've got a guy down here who's tearing it apart. Great guy, ton of potential. And then he said, oh, by the way, he's got British family. We were like,
Yeah.
okay, let's chat. You know, we were at that process. Like a lot of teams were, you know, we hadn't got our visa application license things through, and so we were like, you know, we were in a position where we didn't know whether we'd be able to get the work permits in time for the year. So that, you know, obviously Robbo being a British passport holder and having the year that he had the year before was a no-brainer to take a chance with Robbo. And then Sob's qualified. Like he hasn't got his British passport yet. He's on a British ancestry visa, but he's in the process of getting his British passport. So yeah, and I had a few conversations with him, and again we talked character. I just, you know, it was one of those ones, like we started speaking on the phone like we knew each other for 10 years already. You know, it was really comfortable, and loved the things he had to say, and he kind of did some research on Bristol and liked the look of the city and the rink and where we were going. So yeah, worked well. And same with Tanner. Actually, James Isaac used to play for the Five Flyers. Played with Tanner in Evansville this year. So I kind of speak to James from time to time, and he's a good guy in terms of references. And yeah, that was obviously you've seen a couple of guys who have come off that team and signed in this country this year. So he kind of reached out to me at the start of the summer and said, "Hey, I've got a couple of guys here I think you should look at." And the references on Tanner were excellent. So kind of started digging around, doing my homework elsewhere. Some other guys who played with him, and everything just kept coming back. You know, kept hearing best teammate I've ever played with. Some guy actually said the best human I've ever played with. When you get those type of references on a player, it's hard to like turn your nose down at that. You know, so we watched the video on his play, and I think we've got a guy who's going to be a great player at this level, but we also think he's going to be a great guy in our room and a great leader for us.
I think one of the things I think people will probably sleep on the fact, because there's obviously been a lot of North American imports coming out of American and Canadian college leagues.
Yeah.
This thing, I think people are probably going to sleep a little bit on the SPHL as a league, because it's not a league we've seen a lot of players come out of into Britain, despite the fact that actually, you know, from in comparison to kind of where, you know, the national division is a developing product, it's a developing league still, in that kind of sense of, you know, we've only really technically had like 3 seasons properly of it. But guys coming out of that league, especially a guy as well who played not the highest standard of college hockey in Canada, but, you know, he played for a long time at what will be a very competitive standard, played hockey at ECHL call-ups and stuff like that. I mean, the fact he's playing currently with Paddy Ward is probably the thing that's making me laugh the most, because, yes, folks, those of you who remember the name, Paddy Ward is still playing in Australia. But do you think people might sleep on Tanner a little bit just because he's signed for you guys? Because for me, as an import defenseman, his CV is as solid as any of the others that we've kind of got in the division coming over.
Yeah, I'll be honest, we're super excited. Like we turned up 2 or 3 defensemen that, if I'm honest, that we were super excited about all 3 of them, to the point where it was tough. It was tough to kind of like, okay, which is our guy? We all felt like they were all very different, but we felt like all of them would be high impact guys in this league. But ultimately, like I said, you know, I'm watching the video on Tanner, like he skates really well. You know, we're big on reference checking, especially with these, you know, Canadian guys, you know, North American guys. Getting the inputs in is so important. But the references on him was like through the roof. Like I said, when you're getting guys, like 3 different guys all said to us, best team I ever played with. And any guy will tell you, like, that's worth its weight in gold. Like when guys talk about a guy like that, like at the end of the year, when you do exit interviews with guys and you're kind of asking for feedback, and they're maybe talking about a guy on your roster saying, God, that guy's a good guy. Like those are the guys who are worth their weight in gold. So yeah, so James Isaac said like, hey, like this is a guy you should look at. Like he's legit good. Like he's East Coast standard. Like he had a couple of call-ups last year, but said like, honestly, like he should have been in the coast way more than he was. So I trust James, and we watched the video. But yeah, like, you know, James said probably the best team I've ever played with. And then I reached out to another guy who I recognized, who I knew he played with, and first thing he said was, "Oh yeah, great guy, like one of the best teammates I've ever played with." And then one of the guys he played uni with, who's friends with Riley Brandt at the Cardiff Devils, I got his number. He played college with him for a number of years, and like he said the same. He said best teammate, and then he said, actually scratch that, like best human I've ever played with. So
So no pressure, Tanner.
No pressure, Tanner, if he's watching.
Before trying to get a good old cup down south with JFK.
But his skill set's good. Like I think he's gonna like you said, we're happy to go under the radar. Like people are writing us off as a team. I'm seeing that right now, and so maybe guys like Tanner, because they signed for us, will go under the radar. But I know other teams in our league were looking at him and speaking to him. We're excited to have him. Sobs knows him a little bit, so. We think we've got a really good all-rounder. I mean, having said that, the guy who signed in Leeds, the D-man who signed in Leeds, I like the look of him. I think he's going to be a real stud for them. But yeah, the change to 3 imports is kind of exciting. With some of these D-men coming in, we're going to see some real different prospects.
Looking at your roster, the thing that strikes me is there has been a chunk of turnover. Reece Kelly has gone up the M4, which I'm sure will probably stick in the craw of a few of your fans, if nothing else. Ali Robertson has obviously moved on. Ben Solder has moved on. They've joined Will Curlin at MK, and you've made what I think are some interesting choices in terms of who you've brought in. Juha Lindgren is a player that I'm massively high on, having watched a fair bit of him for the last couple of years. I'll ask the question because I didn't get the opportunity to ask it of anybody in Peterborough last year. Ralph Sasenis comes with a backstory and he comes with a reputation of what has gone before. Last year, he had probably his best year in a year where he was almost not noticed. What do you think you can replicate that in Bristol this year to what he got in Peterborough?
First time I came across Ralph was obviously our first year in Bristol. He was at Solent for the first bit of that year, and I'll be honest, he was a pain in our ass. We hated playing against him. But I think a bit like when you talk about Jay Warren earlier, when you get that, when a coach in the team is saying that about you doing something right, generally, he was just a thorn in our side. He played hard, he was gritty, he was getting in people's faces, and then we'd all be talking about him. He'd be getting guys off his game, and then the first time we played Solent, we're down in the rink. It's 2-2. He scores the game winner in the last 40 seconds of the game, and we're just we lose the game in the last 40 seconds. And then he did it again to us later in the year. He got the match winner late in the game, and we obviously had eyes on him that year. He goes to Sweden, and then I'll be honest, I'm sitting here recruiting last summer, and I'm stressing about putting this team together, and then I see Slava and Peterborough announce him, and I was like, because he'd been off the radar in Sweden. He's kind of I'd forgotten about him a little bit, and I was kind of kicking myself that I hadn't thought about him, because I was like, there's a guy, that's a style of player that we want to bring into Bristol. And he had a great year. So I was kind of watching him. I was interested to see how that transition to National League, is he going to, with that transition, because he obviously put up good numbers in Division 1. And I thought, I'll be honest, I thought he was great there. They had some good guys there. They had a good year. They win the cup. But I think the first time we played them, he was on the third line. I can't remember who he was with, but he was on the third line, and I was kind of thinking, okay. But then we were in Peterborough one night, and he scores a bomb of a one-timer on the power play on his sort of offhand in that little 1T pocket. And I was surprised how good a shot he had. And then the last 2 times we played them, he was playing on the top line with Padlock and Billing, and so he played all up and down their lineup through the year. He played PK, he played power play, and again, I know a few of the boys in the Peterborough team, so I spoke to 1 or 2 of them, when Ralph's had told them that he probably wasn't going to go back, and they said great things about him. Obviously there's a backstory, and there's rumors and different allegations and different things that happened, and I've heard all of that, and so I was wondering what he was about. But I spoke to 1 or 2 of the boys in Peterborough, and they loved him there last year. They had a great group. They had a tight locker room. They obviously won a cup.
Yep.
I'll give Slava credit. I chat to Slava a bit, but as soon as we signed him, Slava texted me and said best of luck to Ralph. He said, you've got a great guy there. He was really positive, really complimentary about him. So we're hoping we can replicate what he did last year in Peterborough. But he'll probably start with a bigger responsibility than he started in Peterborough. He kind of earned his chance, I think, as the year went on in Peterborough, and kind of worked his way up. But he'll be starting in our top 6.
Heading towards the end of our time as we are, I think there's two teams that we do need to kind of talk about that are obviously going to be very, very heavy on everybody's minds. The first is Solway, because that's 6 hours each way on a bus for you guys. That's gonna be fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
Aside from the fact everybody keeps saying that doing the miles is just part of it. Obviously you guys were a new addition to the national division. A year or so ago now. Hull came in. Are you kind of wishing somebody had come in the south, maybe? Maybe Plymouth had finally got a rink rather than needing to drive into Scotland. But Solway have kind of come in. They've made quite a bit of a splash. They kind of brought a level of excitement with them. They've got a very unique group, quite a strong core. I assume you guys are quite excited to kind of see what they're all about.
Yeah, I think they're going to be a good addition. Look, I'm not going to sit here and lie and say as soon as their name got thrown in, I was mega excited. You look at the travel, and you're like, the first thing you think about is the travel. You're just like, oh, the travel. But I speak to Aaron in Swindon a lot. And we talk about the good thing in this league is I think a lot of the coaches and people are pretty close right now. Everyone understands, like, as much as we got our own agendas, the league as a product and how strong the league is and how sustainable and stable it is the biggest thing we all have to really buy into and care about right now. And bringing another team in is important for keeping the league fresh and keeping it strong and keeping the numbers healthy. And those guys have dominated in the north, and they want to, and give them credit. Like, people were saying the same about us when we announced we were going to national that first year in Division 1. I was watching social media and fan forums, and people were slagging us off for wanting to go up, and I just couldn't understand that mentality. People would say, why are you going to go up? You're going to get killed and this and that. I was just a bit like, I don't get that. Like, I understand where they're coming from, but I was a bit like, yeah, but like, don't you want to put like, I'm a guy who wants to push. I want to go to the highest level and challenge people at the highest level and get out my comfort zone and push. And we always said in Bristol we wanted to go to the highest level. And Martin, to be fair, and Solway, like, they've done a great job in Division 1 North for years, and they win the quadruple this year. And if I'm honest, they're probably getting a bit bored, and they want that challenge.
That's certainly the impression they've given me.
Yeah, they kind of want that challenge, and give them credit. Like, they could have stayed there and been comfortable and won everything every year, but they're going to come up and get out their comfort zone. Like, they're going to have, as much as we moan about our travel, they're going to have the worst travel in the league because they're doing it every week. To give them credit, yeah, I give them credit. Like, I hold my hat out to them. Like, they're coming on, they're putting together a team that looks like it's going to be good. Their social media has been excellent. Everything they're putting together, right now looks good. And by having another professional organization like that, it makes the National League stronger again. So not massively excited about the long bus trips, but I am excited to have Martin, who I know really well, and Solway in the league. I think it's good to have a different team.
The other question that we do need to touch on, because this is very much the news of the moment, it's the 25th of July 2023 as you and I are speaking. There has been a few news stories about the Sheffield Steelers' desire to take over the Sheffield Steel Dogs in the last couple of days. It has been met with a bunch of different viewpoints and discussion and so on and so forth. I confess quite a sizable amount of skepticism as to whether it is a good thing. Then give us an opinion, Jamie. Where do you? I appreciate there will be a level of diplomacy you need to maintain here, but where do you sit on this? Because it's quite a big issue, and we're about a month or so out from the start of the season, and this could be quite a sizable change to the landscape of the national division.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Like, hand on heart, it's a hard one to answer because I don't really know what is actually going on behind the scenes there. I don't really know, and that's the honest, hand on heart answer right now. I think the biggest thing that I think we all have to agree on is that we don't want to lose a Sheffield team in the National League. We don't want to lose the Steel Dogs. So whatever the ownership is, whether that's Ali or Tony Smith or somebody else, I'm not sure. Like, we certainly don't want to, have teams that are struggling or have teams that can't have ownership. So I don't really know what the logistics are behind that. I kind of understand. I've read the same articles as you. I kind of understand the Steelers kind of thinking for wanting to come in, and I think if Tony Smith came in, he's got the business, background from the Steelers to, I'm sure, make the Steel Dogs a success. But Ali and the guys who've been in Sheffield, I mean, obviously it's my first year in National League, but I've kind of followed it a bit for the last few years. But they've done a hell of a job. I'm sure they're not the biggest budget in the team by a long way, in the league by a long way, but playoff winners. I mean, they were one of the teams that we didn't get a single win against this year, and they were a team we talked about all the time. Just like, how did this team like do it week in, week out? Like, how do they do it? Like they're competitive every week, and hats off to them. But yeah, I mean, I'm not really sure. It's frustrating. Obviously, it's the end of July, and by this point, normally fixtures have been out a while. And while this wrangles on in the background, it's tough. It's tough for everyone to move forward. So ultimately, we all want a strong Steel Dog team in the league. As much as we all care about our teams and we want to worry about us, we all want more teams in the league. And that's going back to what we're saying about Solway coming in. You've got to add these teams in when the opportunities are in, because you never know when you're going to suddenly lose a team or a team's going to change. Like the Basingstoke situation, it's tough. Yeah. So I'm not sure what's going on, but in hand on heart, we know I enjoyed playing those guys last year. And I hope they're back and. With whoever the owner is here, and in some form and back competing, because I think it's good for the league to have them there, because ultimately we want numbers in the league, and Tony Smith coming in makes it more sustainable long term. Maybe that's the way forward, but as a group of owners in the league, and I'm obviously not privy to the owners' meetings, but the owners they have to make decisions on what's best for the package and the product that is National League right now.
I will leave you with one final question, because I like my weird anecdotals, because I've thrown a few of them out. So here are your options. Bristol make Coventry, make the playoffs, make the finals weekend.
Yeah.
You win nothing. You don't win a trophy next year, but you get a 20% increase in your budget the following year. Or you win a trophy this year, but they bring the toll back in on the bridge.
Well, that's easy, because Richie will pay for that. So we'll win a
I should have thought that through. You'd get
win a trophy, and Richie will have to suck up my bridge fare a couple of times a week. But yeah, I'll be honest. Traveling back and forth a few times, it's nice not having that bridge fare anymore.
Yeah.
It's good. But we would love to win. We'd love to win something. There's no doubt about that. But I think we're a few years off that, but it's a building process.
Well, the building continues, as it were, and we've got, we're about a few weeks out from the beginning of the season. We await what happens for the Bristol Pitbulls with interest. Jamie Elson, thank you for taking the time this evening, mate.
No worries, a pleasure.